All right, so we're going to get started. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Welcome to our Improving Healthcare Interactions with Patients with Disabilities webinar. My name is Alexandra Luzier. I'm the Vice President of Business Development and Communications with Accessible Pharmacy Services. We're so excited to have you all here today. This is being recorded. There is an ASL interpreter and closed captioning is available if you'd like to turn that on. But it is being recorded and, will be placed on the site after we are done today. I also want to thank our incredible presenters who are here with us today, Tom, Veronica, and Patricia. And I want to thank our interpreter. This webinar, like I said, has live interpretation and will also be recorded with that live interpretation onto our site. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, really quickly, we are Accessible Pharmacy Services. We're a home delivery pharmacy company, and we specialize in individuals with disabilities. We're the only provider of its kind. We were founded by somebody who is blind, and our mission really revolves around creating an inclusive experience in pharmacy for individuals with disabilities and their families. A lot of what we've done has kind of grown a lot, thankfully, over the years. So we actually have done a few of these types of webinars before on various healthcare topics. We've done, one on clinical trials, a few on diabetes, actually. We do have one focused on breast cancer, on eye drops. All of them are recorded and available on our website if you ever want to go check any of those out. But today, we're actually doing this webinar in collaboration with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. We've worked closely with them over the past year to really understand diabetes resources in the state of Michigan. We've actually done a couple of different webinars with them already. This is number 3. We did a webinar in March, and we also did a webinar in April on in March, it was all about diabetes devices and understanding the accessibility of those devices for somebody with low vision. And then our second webinar in April was about food access in the state of Michigan. Overall, with the Michigan team, we really have a goal of analyzing the accessibility of diabetes resources, as well as hopefully providing more resources and more, accessible resources for providers and patients throughout the state, such as these webinars. We're actually also in the process of evaluating all of their diabetes resources for their accessibility levels for the blind and low vision community. We're also in the process of offering an accessible diabetes prevention program for the blind community. Our diabetes prevention program is, we've been doing it for a couple of years now. It's completely virtual and it's taught by a woman who is blind herself. Her name is Lynn. She's absolutely amazing. She's done a few cohorts before that have all been really, really successful. And for somebody who is blind or has low vision, a diabetes prevention program that is taught by somebody who is blind and also includes participants who are blind or have low vision is incredibly helpful. They have discussions about accessible exercises, reading food labels, understanding your kitchen, cooking, and just improving on, daily healthy habits. And so it's a really, really great program. We love to provide it. Lynn is really incredible. So if you think that you have anybody that would be interested in that program or would benefit from that program, please just send us an email, and we would love to get them registered. Another project we have are another project we have are these educational webinars. We're really, really excited about them. We're super excited for our presenters today. If you have any ideas on any future webinar topics that we could cover, we would love to hear them. Please reach out to us and let us know. And we're once again just really, really grateful for Tom and his team for speaking today. And we're really grateful for the Michigan team and their strive for accessibility in their programs and communication. We especially want to thank Tama from the Michigan team. Tama's wonderful. She really spearheads all of these initiatives. And we're so excited for all of our future projects together as we sign on for another year together to continue all of these exciting projects. The last thing I'll mention before I hand the mic over is that after this webinar is over, if you've attended any of these webinars before, you know that there will be a follow-up email going out that will include that webinar recording link. and it will also have a link to submit feedback. Please go ahead and submit that feedback. We'd love to hear any ideas you have, any feedback that you have on the accessibility of the webinar, the topic itself. And it really, really helps us learn more and how to continue providing really helpful information in an accessible way. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today, Tom, Veronica, and Patricia. They are all with the Accessible Insulin Pump Task Force, and they really, really have been driving forces in the diabetes community for decades. So they would like for this presentation to be more conversational. If anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask. But thank you again, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Tom, Veronica, and Patricia, for being here and giving this presentation. We're so excited. So go ahead.
All right, you got it. Thanks for that great introduction, Alexandra. Good afternoon. Like most of you, my colleagues are on the West Coast, so good morning to you, Veronica and Patricia.
Good morning.
Yeah, they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed today. So since we have kind of an intimate group today, we would like to keep it conversational. But all three of us also happen to be totally blind. Two of us from complications of living with diabetes long-term, and one having been born blind and acquiring diabetes later in life. So we also are all members of the American Council of Blind Diabetics in Action, which we work very, very closely with Alexandra and Andy and all the people at Accessible Pharmacy. So we have a great collaborative relationship with you guys, and we love it. And we're glad to be here today. Your segue or your introduction, Alexandra, is a perfect segue for me because I'd like to talk to the group a little bit. Well, I don't want to. I'd like you guys to learn a little bit more about what the Accessible Insulin Pump Task Force is all about. And we are blessed today to have our chair, Veronica LZ, with us. So, Veronica, you want to give us a little overview of what we do in the task force?
Sure. The Accessible Insulin Pump Task Force has one goal, and that is to help all of the manufacturers understand what it means and actually go ahead and really make their products accessible to people who are blind or low vision. And we have been around since 2021, and the past 2.5 years have just been miraculous compared to where we've been for the last 40. We now have several choices among continuous glucose monitors, and we have a very close collaborative relationship with Dexcom. We also work with several different insulin pump companies, Tandem, Omnipod, Sequel MedTech that makes the twist, and we have blind people successfully using these pumps independently, safely, and easily. Well, okay, there's iPhone apps involved, and I'm sure each one of you have had plenty of moments where you cuss and fuss at your phone, and we're not immune to that either. But the exciting thing about this that is important for you to take away is that should you have a blind client, a blind patient who wants to manage their diabetes more successfully or is interested, the important thing is to know that nowadays using an insulin pump, if you are blind or low vision, is not just for the tech-savvy pioneers. Now it's more, and we're just like all of your other patients. Some people are successful, some people aren't, but it's more to do with pumps in general and the same kinds of things. You see sighted people that say, I hate the alarms, bye-bye. You see sighted people that go, I don't want to carry a phone around. So we have reached that point where our reasons for not being, quote unquote, successful with the pump are pretty much the same as yours. And this is really exciting. So if you get a patient and approach them, go, there are options. Now, there are some things we may need some longer or different explanations, different kinds of training, contact with each other. And that is the one thing that you can also take away is that the blind community, we are here to help each other. And we can say, oh, that's a weird swipe, you do this, and somebody goes, oh, thank you, and off you go. So helping each other out is, we're still early enough that that's really important, but just knowing that it's here, we too can manage our diabetes in the same way that our sighted peers can. And that's the exciting takeaway, and that we will continue as a task force to work with any company that pops up and continue to work with and say, hey, we need this, and let's help make this app work with VoiceOver. And for any of you who don't know, VoiceOver is a way to read the screen. It comes on all iPhones. It's just there. You just have to turn it on. So if you are a trainer, you might want to get a little bit of help understanding it so that you understand a little bit, because the gestures are different for your blind clients. But it is time to go and say the world is wonderful. We can do this. So that's what we're for.
Absolutely. So I know we're topic today is about working with individuals who are blind or low vision, and we wanted to get into, Alexander, I don't know if you shared, we sent what I call a blindness etiquette worksheet to Alexandra. To, if we didn't share it before, we can certainly share it after this meeting. But
Tom, I have
basically,
it linked on the webinar webpage.
perfect. Thank you. That's great.
Of
So
course.
I don't know how many of you guys had a chance to look at that, but we're going to get into this. But we really do want to keep this conversational. So if you have questions, feel free to jump in and ask the questions, because I think all three of us would agree that if you don't ask the question, you're not going to get the right answer. You're not getting any answer. So you might make assumptions that may turn out to be very, very wrong and inaccurate. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Patricia, who's going to start getting us into an introduction on blindness etiquette.
Yes, this is Patricia. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, whatever. This webinar is actually to talk about people with disabilities. But as you can see, the three of us, our disability is blindness, and I guess you can even call diabetes somewhat of a disability as well. So that's the angle that we're coming from. But I think a lot of the information we're going to talk about today can be applied to all kinds of disabilities as well. So in terms of dealing with people with blindness or other disabilities, first thing that you want to always think of is treating the person with dignity and respect. Because oftentimes, people that have a disability feel that they're not being treated as a real person, or they're being talked down to. So keep that in mind first and foremost. That's the main thing you always want to keep in mind. Maintaining the person's autonomy and offering assistance to people with blindness only when they really want it. Don't assume that they want assistance and just grab a person's arm and start steering them. It's always important to offer if it appears the person might need some assistance, and go from there. If the person wants it, they'll let you know. If not, they'll also let you know. It's really important for you always to identify yourself. Just and talking maybe for a moment here about, just kind of meeting people, whether it's like in an appointment, in an office, is kind of what we're talking about today, is that, being blind, we don't know, when a person enters the room, we don't really know how many people are around, or how many people are trying to interact with us, or just happen to be, in the room at the same time. And so that often presents really awkward moments. So keep that in mind right away, that if you are going to interact with this person, immediately identify yourself. And you may have a wonderful, great big name badge that says Joe Blow, Vice President of whatever, but we can't see that. So, come in and say, well, I'm Sally Jones, and I'm an RN, or whatever your position is, and that would explain the purpose for you meeting with this person today. That's the first thing we want to know. And then also, if you've got people with you, that may be evident if the person can see, but maybe you have an intern with you, or somebody else along. Be sure and let the person know. Doctors nowadays, they come in and they've got like the medical assistant, and then they've got the scribe, and it's like, I'm so confused as to who's the doctor if I'm meeting them the first time or whatever. I need to know who's who and kind of where they are in the room and what their purpose for being there is. And so, keep in mind that's kind of the first step that you want to do, because we just don't know. The other thing is often people, they come in and they shake your hand, and of course we got away from that during COVID, but we don't know when you've put your hand out to shake it. So if you do want to shake hands, say something like, may I shake your hand, or I'd like to shake your hand. And that just cuts down on a lot of that awkwardness, because you don't know how often, we get, like, if someone's with me, they'll say, oh, she's blind, he's putting out his hand, and then we have this awkward handshake, and sometimes it ends up being left-handed. It's just so easy for you to say, let me shake your hand, and take it from there. So those are some of those awkward types of things that I thought I'd just kind of share some examples of. Never distract a working guide dog, and Veronica's she's going to talk maybe a little bit more about that, so I'll just mention that right there. Remember that blind people are above all individuals, just like everybody else. And, even though Veronica and Tom and I have a lot of things in common, and that's kind of why we work together a lot, we're still very individual people. I mean, we had widely differing careers. We had our blindness came on in different ways at different times in our lives. We all have type 1 diabetes, but still our type 1 diabetes is still different from each other. So keeping in mind that, the same guidelines won't apply to all people who are blind. And like Tom was saying, unless you feel like totally comfortable with dealing with blind people, because maybe you grew up in a family where a family member was blind, or you've worked with a lot of blind people, just don't be afraid to ask the person, how can you be of assistance, or how can you, help in their learning process? What can you do? And, blindness isn't the main characteristic of the person. You're talking to a person just like any of the other people you encounter during the day. You're just talking to a person that happens to be blind. I give you like a really brief example. Like, my friends are really great. I have a great group of friends. Like, we go over to somebody's house, maybe somebody's house I haven't been to before. They greet you at the door. You're talking about this, that, and the other thing, the weather and so forth. And, maybe they stop to think, oh, Patricia might want to know I have a sunken living room. So they'll stop just for a moment and say, hey, Patricia, we're all going to go in the kitchen because that's where everybody is. But be aware that off to your right is a sunken living room. So, just, don't go that direction. Okay. And then we go about talking about what we're talking about. I mean, so they're treating me, not as a blind person, but they pick up and they're aware enough of one little thing that I might want to know. And the rest of the time, we're not talking about blindness. And so, that's the thing. You want to talk to these people about, what you're there to talk about. But from time to time, there may just be something that you have to do a little bit differently because the person's blind. So you don't want to hand them a long piece of paper and say, well, read this, and if you approve, sign there. That would need to be done a little bit differently. So, those are just some general things kind of to get started.
Any questions so far, guys?
Yeah.
We just covered a lot of ground in about 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but if not, then I'd really love to have Veronica talk about dog guy etiquette, or just assistance animal etiquette, because I've had two guide dogs, and it's always been just amazingly shocking. People kind of lose their minds around assistance animals, right, Veronica?
Yep, they're
so
do.
cute.
They're so
yes,
cute.
They are. Yes, they are. And I've had working dogs for 52 years. So,
wow.
And I'm the member of the group who's been blind my entire life. Now they call it retinopathy of prematurity. I was a twin. We were 3 months early, so I've been blind all my life. So the most important thing is to understand that the dog, as lovable as they are, and sometimes I have to tell my dog, I can't tell the sighted people not to pet you if you don't quit petting the sighted people. So, because they're very friendly, they have to be. But that the dog is there to assist me. So, for instance, when I come in the room, you would hear me say, Lacey, to the seat, and she would take me to a seat. Sometimes she might take me to the doctor's chair, and then I'm like, I like that salary, but she will find me a seat. But your job is to interact with me. So, if somebody were using a long white cane, you wouldn't talk to the cane. Now, I might, because I always do. Stop it! I always talk to my things. But you wouldn't interact with the cane. You would interact with the person, and that's true with the dog. And so if you are the person who, say, meets me in the waiting room, please don't go, because now the dog is focused on you and not focused on guiding me. And the dog could clip a corner in trying to hurry up and follow you. So it's important that you ask me. Some people with dogs may still say, "Can I take your arm?" Some people like me might say, "I'll have my dog follow you." Just say a little something. And so, again, it's communication. It's the answer for everything. Sometimes when I'm back in the room, and I tend to do this particularly if I have a nurse or a doctor that is going to do things to me, like injections or looking at my feet or something like that, that some people may say, if you ask, "May I say hi to your dog?" They might say yes. Some dogs remain very calm. Some dogs like mine, "Oh, yeah!" So you may ask the person, "Can I pet your dog?" But then respect the answer you get. I might say, "Not right now." Oh, it can vary from dog to dog, but just remember the dog, it sounds kind of harsh to say, but the dog is my tool. Now, my tool, I get to play with her when I get home and hug her, but in harness, she is there to keep me safe. And then when I leave your room, she's there to get me out and find the door and do things like that. So that is the thing to keep in mind with a dog.
Excellent. Either we bored you guys to death because it's total silence, or you're just raptured with interest. But so I see people leaving. So maybe it's the latter, not the former, not the latter. Anyway, so we would like to open it up for questions and answers. I mean, I could start with a little. I know part of this, Alexander, was to do some storytelling. So I will tell a little anecdotal dog guide thing that Patricia and Veronica know it, but I lived here in downtown Cleveland years ago. I was taking my dry cleaning across the street to go, get dry cleaned. And so I had a guide dog, and my turn to cross street. So I told him to go, and we went, and we're turning down the street to go to the dry cleaners. And all of a sudden this car comes like roaring up to the curb and screeches to a halt. And it's my ophthalmologist. He jumps out, "Tom, Tom, 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 how are you? How are you? How are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, Dr. Myers, I'm great. How are you?" And blah, blah, blah. And he's like, "Now tell me, how does the dog know where to go? Does he smell where you're?" I said, I looked at him with this like incredulous face, like, "You got to be kidding me." And here's a guy that's got all kinds of, credentials behind his name, and he's asking how the dog. So I very politely said, "No." I said, "The dog is as Veronica said, is a tool. So when I tell him to cross the street, if it's safe, he'll cross the street. When I tell him to turn, I need to know in my head where we're going. So I give my dog direction, and my dog follows my directions, and their job is to guide me to where we're going safely, yet following my instructions as long as they don't put either of us in harm's way." So it's a great story because, and my ophthalmologist is such a good guy, and he was such a good sport about this. But it's a funny story because, some people, even that have the most brains in the world, think that these dog guides are somehow like clairvoyant or something. I don't know, but I tell
Oh,
my
well,
dog to
mine
take,
is, but
yeah, take me to the dry cleaner, knows where to go. I wish it was that easy, actually, but
yeah, well,
it's not. So that's one anecdote that I thought we could break the ice with because it was pretty funny. And I still stay in touch with my ophthalmologist. We get a kick out of it every time we laugh about it. So it's okay to laugh and make jokes, and it's all good. But anyway.
I had one I was in the Apple store the other day, and all of a sudden my dog started to get kind of excited, and this person comes over. "I'm sorry, I had to say something so you'd know." It was my rheumatologist.
Oh.
We had run into my doctor in the Apple store.
So Lacey recognized him?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's funny. That's funny.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she knows him well. And she
Okay.
got all excited to see him. I wanted to add something about people that are working with, and a really couple of really quick examples that just happened recently. And that is some of the words that you used. And I think it's real important to get that we are the people you serve. We are not a liability. We are not more fragile than anybody else. We're all depending on what we're there for. And one thing that really gets me is I guarantee you, if any of you ever encounter me in California, if you use the word safety in the first sentence, I have turned you off and shut you down, and I won't hear anything else you say. Because my safety is no different than anyone else. And here's a picture. So you got to put yourself into this picture. And this happened to a friend of mine who's blind 2 days ago. He went to a clinic and he had to get an MRI. He's blind, nothing else. His feet are fine, everything is fine, but he's blind. He was sitting in the lobby. Okay, so you are now sitting in the lobby. They call your name to come back. You stand up. You start to move. And all of a sudden, my friend hears, now, this is for your safety. They actually brought the MRI table into the lobby because they thought he needed to be safe and lie down on this table and then be wheeled back into the MRI. Now, what do you think that would feel like, having everybody staring at you, and and how kind of humiliating that would feel
Totally.
when it's not something you need? And they couldn't understand why he was upset. He had a long fight with them to get himself standing up and walking back into the MRI place. We were
That's pretty bad.
astounded.
That's pretty bad.
And then I had one appointment, and this was a doctor I'd never met before. And consequently, I didn't do anything he said to do. Because the entire time during this appointment, from the moment he walked in, now during this entire appointment, I was sitting on a chair, not even an exam table, just a regular chair. I'm sitting there the entire time. The guy was interrupting himself. Don't fall. Don't fall.
Oh my
So
God.
I never use his name now. He's Mr. Don't Fall, and I will not see him.
Uh,
Don't fall. You'd be amazed what people do. And I'm like, stop it. So
yeah.
I didn't I didn't hear anything he said. He didn't hear anything I said. So again, it's just communication, have fun, you can laugh, you can talk, you can ask questions, you can argue, whatever. But we're just like everybody else. You may have people that are more fragile for one reason or another, not even related to blindness. And that's kind of your job, to pay attention, but let people tell you what they need. Let people say, no, I'm fine. If somebody says, can you find the chair? I can say, yes, I can, thank you. That's just an honest question. But
Mhm.
those are just two examples of things that, you know, it shuts me down.
And
It shuts me
I
down.
appreciate his anecdotes too, but I would just add that Patricia touched on this, but I think it's really, and
Yeah.
Veronica just reemphasized it, but it's really important, I think, to say to yourself it's okay to ask a question. I mean, we haven't gotten any questions yet, but I'm sure you guys have questions. But you know, when I could see, I knew my best friend had two blind cousins, and this, of course, was back in the early 70s, so there wasn't any rehabilitation, anything back in those days. So they really couldn't do anything for themselves. And I felt like, whoa, God, I sure hope to hell that never happens to me. Well, it did. But thank God we're in a different place these days, as far as independence and self-sufficiency and living alone and having a job and, starting and raising a family, all that good stuff. So again, that just reiterates what both Patricia and Veronica said about we're just like everybody else. We just don't see. Um, so do you have any questions yet, Alexander? I don't know if they're raising hands, if they're being very polite, if they're raising hands, but just feel free to jump in.
I
And
don't see any hands or anything. We did have a question that was submitted ahead of time, which I do feel as if you guys have touched on already. But I'll just send it out there just in case you have anything else. It says, what works best for building trust and improving patient engagement in patients with disabilities in preventative programs?
it's a great question. I'm sure all three of us could touch on it, but I think that's probably the secret sauce, right, ladies? I mean, that's,
Mhm.
we if you treat us just like everybody else and realize that, we just don't see, but we have a brain, we can talk, all the things that Veronica and Patricia mentioned, that is really for me. And Veronica, made a very strong statement about a doctor, and we've had situations with colleagues of ours who've basically fired their endocrinologist because they
Oh yeah,
didn't
I
think
did.
yeah, I mean, Veronica, others have too. They didn't think, like, for example, that if you're blind, you can possibly be on an insulin pump. And it's outrageous because people live in, the days of stereotypes and misconceptions. And as Veronica so eloquently stated with the task force, I mean, we are using a lot of these devices today with, the support of having smartphone apps that we can interact with just as well as anybody else for the most part. So, um, you know, I don't know, ladies, if we want to talk about some of the ins and outs of, because you both use different insulin pumps, and
Hmm.
some people might be interested to know, let's not get into the weeds, but some of the ins and outs of using the
Hmm.
insulin Omnipod and the Tandem Mobi. But
I would like to start with just one quick sentence that I think is really important, and that is to start from the assumption that your blind person will succeed,
good point.
just as you do with anybody else. And if you're looking at a preventive program, what's important is just like any other patient, find out what the person's attitude is. Some of us, just like all the rest of your patients, some of us really want to succeed and are going to go, I am really here to get the best control of my diabetes. Others are there and go, blankety blank, I'm going to do the minimum possible. So some of us are
Hmm.
lazy, some of us are neurotic, some of us are in between. We've got the same wide variety. But if you start with the assumption that we will succeed or that we can succeed, the other line that I had to fight all the way through is, well, can your husband do that for you?
Oh God, yes.
Can your husband do that for you? And my response is always, what if he dies? Sometimes you got to get just a little bit dramatic to bring the point home. Um,
Punch him right between
and,
the eyes, Veronica.
yep. And so that they're not always around. Your
Yeah,
husband can end up in the hospital. Mine has many times, or
yeah,
we can, where we travel. Um, and so it's the positive assumption. Hi, glad you're here. What are your goals? And, just the same things that you'd say to everybody else. That's really important. And just that happy, comfortable, interaction. Sometimes you end up looking at charts a lot. Used to happen a little more than it does now, but, let's look at this graph and see where you've been. Oops, how do we discuss it? And I had one doctor that I used to love to mess with his mind, and he'd look at my blood glucose reading. This was before the CGMs, and he'd like, so what were you doing on August 19th? And
flying a plane.
yeah, so the fortunate thing is that several times when he asked me about the dates, I knew what had happened. And so I was able to answer him. And so I just
Hmm.
started messing with his mind just because that's who I am. um, and, but just like anybody else, you quickly discover how to reach that person, what their personality, and you could have, especially somebody who's like recently blind, you could have somebody who's kind of scared about it. But here now you guys can go, I talked to these people at the webinar and there are people doing it. We can get somebody to help you succeed.
Yeah.
Don't ever use it to punish somebody. Well, I saw these three people and they did it. What's the matter with you? because you have sighted people who go, I can't figure this out. And you have sighted
Yeah.
people that are, down in the weeds with all the tech. And so just be open to the different personalities, to questions, but have the basic assumption it's possible.
That's such a true story. I mean, Veronica and I were, as far as I know, probably the first two totally blind people to go on an insulin pump back in the 90s. Veronica beat me by 2 years in 91 and I won in 93. But the point of me telling the story is that my endocrinologist didn't do pump starts. But when I asked him about it, he obviously had known me for many, many years. And he's like, there was absolutely no question or pushback. He said, absolutely, we'll get you, to the right endocrinologist at Cleveland Clinic and he can do the pump start. And so there was never ever any kind of like, what do you mean you want to go on a pump? You can't see. So I was really probably why I stayed with that endocrinologist for most of my young life, probably until I was in my 30s. So, it does make a difference that people are open to, thinking that we can do it just like anybody else can. Maybe have to do it differently, but we can still do it. So, Patricia, haven't heard from you. Any anecdotes you'd like to share? I know you've got a million.
Anecdotes. Well, yes, I can think of one back a ways. When I was losing my vision, I was been using an insulin pump for many, many years since 1997, and CGMs since they first came out. Actually, my first CGM was the one that worked with the Medtronic pump. So the CGM values printed out on the pump, but as I lost more sight, those numbers seemed to get smaller and blurrier. They were always very pixelated. And I think the Medtronic pump has gotten better now, but until they came out with the newer pump, it was a very pixelated screen anyway. So even if it was large, it wasn't real visible. But I wanted to check out the Dexcom and, some of the other pumps. I wanted to check out some options. So I made an appointment with my diabetes educator at my doctor's office now. And I told when I made the appointment, now I'm losing my vision. And, I want you to pass that on to the gal because I couldn't reach her directly. I think this was earlier before you could, send a message via the patient portal. So I had to rely on passing it on, let her know that I'm visually impaired. And I want to actually see these devices. I know she's got samples of all the devices. They need to be charged up, so I can really have a hands-on. So I get there. And first of all, she didn't know that I was visually impaired, the diabetes educator. And she couldn't find the right cords and nothing was charged up.
Oh dear.
And so it was a worthless appointment that in my insurance at that time allowed you one appointment. You didn't get to have follow-ups with your diabetes educator. So that was kind of a disaster. The message wasn't passed on to her that I needed to have these charged up. I wanted to look at them because maybe I was wanting, to get a new pump or a new CGM system. So, being resourceful that I am, but, some people are intimidated by that and they would just give up, which is easy to do because it's very hard.
Sure.
But I then set up appointments with all the pump company reps and all the CGM reps. And of course, they want to sell you something. So, they work, they, make sure that they come with devices that are charged up that they can demo. And, but then I had to meet individually in my doctor's office with each of those different representatives, whereas the educator could have showed me all the equipment that she had in the office. And, if it had been charged up, she couldn't even find the right cords to plug them in. So that was unfortunate. I don't know where the breakdown in the link was, if they didn't give her that information or she wasn't listening or whatever. So anyway, that's kind of one of my stories. And, finally I got through to all the reps and I was able to check out all the products and it was a lot of work. But when there's a will, there's a way. And, I did find that I was able to use devices that, maybe somebody else would have told me I couldn't use. So not taking no for an answer.
Yep.
Well, I just looked at my watch. We're about getting close to quarter of top of the hour here. So you guys have any questions for us? I mean, we could talk
Come on,
about
I
this
dare
stuff.
you. I dare you. Go for
I
it.
know
dare ya.
there's one
We-
topic that's near and dear to our hearts, particularly Veronica. And that's in the office of not talking through the person that might be accompanying us to the
Oh
appointments.
yeah.
Because we
Yes.
often do bring a family member because diabetes is kind of a family thing. But that's not the person that you talk to. You talk to us and not through our family
Mhm.
member or whoever we bring with us. Because we've ended up losing papers that were given to the family member and then they were never seen again.
Yeah.
Had they been given to
Yeah.
me, they would have
Yep.
gone into my purse and they would
Yep.
have gotten home. So, and, don't assume that the accompanying person is somehow smarter than I am. Um, I'm the patient. So, talk directly to me.
And I do have my husband come along when I'm doing a pump training. At least in the early days I did. Now I don't. Um, but we're in the older part of the age group, and so I have to go to all his appointments because he has so much trouble hearing. So I go to his. He doesn't go to mine. But I think it is important to know that, you know, what do you call them? If you notice that there's somebody with me, you don't really know if is it a spouse, is it a caregiver? Most blind people don't have caregivers. Um, when I was a little younger, people used to assume he was my father all the time because he had white hair. Um, but so, you know, use the same wording that you might if it were a sighted person standing on the other side of the counter or sitting in the room. You know, introduce yourself to the spouse or whoever the person is, hi, so that they get a sense of what that person's role is, and that if you're there as a spouse, you want to behave as a spouse. And go, yeah, it's a new diagnosis of diabetes and it's a serious thing, so I want to participate. But, you know, talk to the person who's actually living with diabetes. Couple of times in the early days, my husband kind of came up with a way of explaining something that the trainer was having a little trouble explaining. So he was helpful in that regard. But we broke the ice pretty quickly, and I think icebreakers can be really important too. I went up, this was in 1991, and so I went up to the Bay Area. We were going to do a training session, and we were there for the first time. My trainers were there for the first time. We all had to look for something to eat before my training session started. So we're driving around. We couldn't find anything but this burger place. So we go, all right, we'll go in here. Maybe this will be my last burger. I don't know. We'll go in here. And so we go in, and my husband says to me, oh gosh, I see your pump trainers. They're sitting across the room. And I go, oh no, they're going to know I got a burger and fries sitting right here. And what I didn't realize is that at the same time, they were looking across the table going, oh no, there's the person we're supposed to be training. And I bet he's going to tell her that
That's
we're
a great
eating a
story.
burger and fries. And so when we first got into the room to do the pump training, that's where we started. And we were just on the floor laughing
That's
because we'd
pretty
all
funny.
done the same thing. So you never know when you can run into an icebreaker. And the other thing I wanted to add about the dog is careful about the criticism. Your dog just sniffed. Your dog took you to the wrong seat. You know, be
Mm,
kind.
yep.
Say, what a nice looking dog. Can I help you with anything? So just kind of be mindful. Is it really necessary that you say that? Because sometimes I've had the experience where a lot of people will offer criticism, but it isn't really helpful in the moment because A, it's already happened, or B, it's not germane to what we're doing.
Hmm.
But just, have fun. If the most important thing is, you know what? If I laugh, that really gives you permission to laugh.
Absolutely.
So
And we're
you can
very good at
follow.
laughing at ourselves, right, ladies?
We are.
Yeah.
We are. We absolutely are. So I dare you. Come
Yeah,
up
come
with a
on, guys.
question. Be the
Questions?
first. Be the first.
As I like to tell folks, I'm an open book. Ask me any question. Like, I'll let
Yep.
you know if you cross the line.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
I know we have a few people, a good amount of people that are going to be watching this recording after we're done today. So I can also, give them a shout out one, and then also let them know that they can always reach out to you guys with any questions that they
yeah,
have
sure.
after they
Oh,
tune in.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
especially about the task force too, Alexandra, because I mean that
Yes.
Yeah.
we could be a great resource to all of you here today, for patients that you run into that are low vision or blind. And because a lot of doctors, not being critical, but they see the disclaimer about, if this disclaimer language and all these products that say you shouldn't use them if you're blind, low vision, or hard of hearing or deaf. And we've proved that to be totally useless. It's antiquated and old stereotypic stuff that we need to get changed. But so people are using these devices and they're using them independently. As Veronica said, they're using independently and safely. This can be done. So, and again, the three of us are pretty strong personalities. You probably can tell. They're going to be patients who are kind of more meek, quiet, shy, and they might need a little encouragement, as Veronica said, to be interested in learning how to possibly get on a pump or how to use a CGM or you know whatever the case may be. So
And Tom, we might just say here, because this is being recorded, that we do have blind people in our community using the Tandem Mobi
yep,
and the Omnipod and the Twist pumps and both the Dexcom and Libre CGM successfully. Because there are some other devices out there that aren't as accessible. So, to help a person be successful, it's wise to start with ones that we know have already been tried and true and proven by other members of the community as being usable.
that's a great point, Patricia. Yeah.
And of course, if you're listening to this webinar way off in the future, things could change.
Yes, yes, exactly.
We're
Like
hoping.
tomorrow. Right. We don't expect people that are here today or listening to this recording to necessarily feel comfortable and know how to interact with people with visual impairments. Don't hesitate to show your insecurity and just ask how you can help. Just
Absolutely.
ask the person that's there, what can I do to help make this education process or whatever we're doing, what can I do? And then they'll tell you, because we're all individual in our process. Like, I don't currently use a regular computer. I use an iPad and an iPhone, but Tom and Veronica are old whizzes at using computers. So we're all individuals and we have different
Yep.
and levels of abilities with all this assistive technology. And so, what will work for one of them might not work for me. So, everybody's going to need perhaps different things. So there's no one right answer of this is how you train a blind person.
Right.
you know?
Right. And I'll just give you a quickie example. When I was brand new to diabetes and trying to learn about, well, back then it was exchanges and different things, and I really had trouble understanding, well, how much food do I eat? How much food? The thing that saved me, and boy, I'm in love with them still today, is the plastic fruit.
Oh yeah.
The plastic fruit. I actually entered a drawing to try to win some. I liked him so much. And I tried to bribe the company. Oh, come on. I'll give you one of my CDs if you give me the box of, because I just loved, and that made all the difference for me. Just something that I could get my hands on. This
Literally.
this is
Right.
what the piece of meat size of the piece of meat feels like. This is what the pile of grapes feels like. I just love that stuff. And so for some of us, it's just, especially those of us that have never had any vision, getting my hands on something to feel how big something
Sure.
is, that enlightened me, that relaxed me, that really started me on the journey of, okay, I'll pay some attention on this food amount thing and how I do it. So anytime there can be something where you can cut out a shape or cut out a piece of paper or something like that. Now, somebody who's had vision all their life and it's recent, they might need a slightly different explanation than somebody like me. And but know that generally, if we're walking around, we've had training Okay, we get taught how to use a cane or how to use a dog or how to listen for doorways if we can, or how to navigate or how to ask for help. So, they don't just go, "Oh, you're blind," toss you out in the street and away you go. We have had training, so we do assume that we kind of know what we're doing, and then you can ask, "How do you do this?" You know, "How do
Yep,
you do that? How can I help you with that?" So that's just what I thought of.
I
it's
do
good
have
stuff.
a quick question. My name is Kim, and I'm with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And by training, I'm a dietitian, diabetes educator, but it's been more years than I want to come to terms with since I was out in the field
Yeah,
doing this.
I can
Um,
relate.
but I was just meeting with the Dexcom rep last week, and he mentioned that, the G8 will be out on the market in, I still think it's like 18 months away, but is your team working with them so that they can improve features on that before
Boy,
it ever goes to market?
that is goal number one for us, is get us looking at things ahead of time so that we can talk about what goes into this. Some things we have a little better luck than others, but we are beginning to see more progress in that regard. Some of this has to do with how the FDA sets up who can be in a focus group. And so one of the things that we've had to do is say, yes, we want you to have blind people in your focus groups, and you have to tell the FDA that you're doing it, or we can't necessarily see things ahead of time. That is the number one thing we are chasing for all of these pumps, for all of these Dexcoms, for everything, so that when it comes out, we don't have our history of it comes out and then we have to go, okay, now this doesn't work, that doesn't work, can we fix it,
Right.
so that by the time everybody's on the G9 we finally have a working G8 so that we're not behind. And that is the number one thing we are trying to get the companies to do.
I mean, we're talking about universal design here, and the best example I can come up with is all things iOS. Now, granted, Google has accessibility in their devices too, but Apple really beat them to the punch. But you can go into an iPhone Apple store and you can buy whatever, an iPad and iPhone, iPod, whatever. And as Veronica said earlier, the screen reader comes built into the operating system. So in fact, I was the first person in my household to get onto using an iPhone, and when my wife got one, I had to teach her how to use it. So that kind of, as Veronica said, building it in from the get-go is really where we're going with this, and we have to, because I think we would all agree that universal design makes everything work better for everyone. People used to complain back in the day about curb cuts. Well, when moms with baby strollers and people riding bicycles, they got over that real fast. So this is great. I don't have to go bump over the curb. I go right down the curb cut, and that made life a lot easier for people in wheelchairs. So, that's the kind of stuff we're trying to get these pharmaceutical companies to integrate at the beginning, not the end, as Veronica said. So, hope that answers your question, Kim.
Yes, great, thank you. And it actually it made me think of something else. So when I was working in the field, we backed up all of our information with paper. And Patricia, you had mentioned it goes to the family sometimes instead of you, gets put in your purse. Is it more beneficial to have these handouts and this information on like a website somewhere so that you could use your devices to access them and have it read to you, or is there a better way of doing it?
Well, I'm in Cleveland here, so I use my endocrinologist or my doctors are at the Cleveland Clinic. I love my chart. My chart is apps. I can do everything on my chart
Mhm.
with the exception of like reviewing like a x-ray, something like that, because I can't see that. But all my appointments, all my
Mm-hmm.
after visit summary reports, all that stuff is digitized. And I know all my charts are not created equal, but the one that I'm using here at the Cleveland Clinic is fabulous. So yes, when I leave my appointment with my endocrinologist, she hands me a stack of paper and I keep it just for file, but I don't,
Really.
yeah, so I'm not going to have somebody read it to me because I can do it online.
Yeah. The after visit summary is there for.
Yeah,
I only
me
out of
too.
maybe like 7 or 8 doctors, I only have one office where it's not inaccessible. It doesn't work with my screen reader. But otherwise, yeah, I can access my chart. I can make appointments. I can read the information. So having it, or even just having information, like, rather than giving somebody a brochure, if that information can be emailed. Now, not all people have technology skills. We do happen to. So if you sent us a copy of a brochure, as long as it wasn't a photograph, via email, we'd be able to read it with our screen readers. And that would be great. That's the way I prefer things, is something that I can get, on my email and read.
Yep.
Terrific. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? We're kind of wanting to get down here, Alexandra, but yeah, and you guys can reach out, I guess, through you, Alexandra, if you have questions. They can, I guess, if that's okay with you, Alexandra, to go through you
Absolutely.
to get to
Yep. And I
us.
can
And
put all of your information and the accessible insulin pump task force information on the web page for this webinar. And
great,
on that web page, we'll also have the recording, and it also has those blindness etiquette tips that you sent over.
great.
Awesome. If there's no other questions, we're going to wrap it up. I want to give a huge, huge, huge thank you to Tom, to Patricia, to Veronica for all of this conversation today. Um, I know this can be a really hard conversation to have, but they're incredibly important. And you guys really have such grace and humor and really a really, really wonderful way of talking about everything. It was such an interesting conversation, and we're just so grateful for individuals like you and the work that you do in these spaces. Tom and I have worked together on a couple of different things over the past few years, and I'm always so thankful for his approach and the way you communicate and everything. So this was really, really wonderful, and thank you guys.
Well, likewise, Alexandra, we are all
Thank
big
you.
fans of accessible pharmacy, and so we love helping to educate folks. So if you guys that are here don't, like I said earlier, don't have an answer to a question, you may make assumptions that are not going to be accurate. So, but
Oh,
it's been a pleasure being here. So thanks for having us.
yes, thank you very much.
Yes,
Of
thank you.
course. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope this was really helpful and a great experience. I also want to send a huge, huge thank you to our ASL interpreter, just over the past hour helping us with the accessibility of this webinar. And lastly, I'd like to thank the Michigan team again. We work really closely with them, and we're just so grateful to be able to have conversations like these surrounding disability access and accessibility and improving, diabetes health outcomes ultimately. So this is really awesome. Just a quick reminder, we are sending out that follow-up link. So the recorded webinar will be on there for anybody who has missed it. We can send that to everybody that registered for the webinar. And that email will also have a a feedback link in it to submit any thoughts or ideas that you had about this webinar. Please go ahead and give us any, suggestions for future webinars. And if you're interested in talking to Tom, Veronica, and Patricia more, their information is on our website and will also be in that follow-up email as well as information about the accessible insulin pump task force. So this is all awesome. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, please email us at info@accessiblepharmacy.com. And other than that, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. It's nice and sunny on the East Coast. So thank you, everyone.
Likewise.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Ryan.